Imagine a disease so deadly that it wiped out a third of Europe's population. But the Black Plague wasn't just about death and suffering. It changed the entire social fabric of society in ways that still echo today. Ready to uncover the shocking truth about how the Black Plague reshaped the world? Let's dive into the dark and dramatic aftermath of this medieval catastrophe. We all know the Black Plague is one of the deadliest pandemics in history. It swept across Europe in the 14th century, killing millions. But there's something even more shocking about it. The Black Plague wasn't just a disease, it was a game changer. The social, political, and economic impact of the plague transformed medieval society in ways we often don't hear about. In fact, the changes that followed the plague laid the foundation for the modern world. So, what exactly did the Black Plague do beyond killing so many people? Let's break down the jaw-dropping social changes it triggered that still affect us today. The Black Plague hit Europe in 1347 and it spread like wildfire. In just a few short years, it wiped out an estimated 25 to 30 million people, about a third of the population. But let's be real, the sheer devastation of the disease was just one part of the story. The world was about to change in ways no one could have predicted. Now imagine a society where death was everywhere. Entire towns were wiped out, trade routes were disrupted, and families were torn apart. People didn't just lose their loved ones, they lost their way of life. This pandemic struck at the heart of Europe, and it had a ripple effect that would change everything. One of the most immediate and shocking changes caused by the plague was the labor shortage. With so many people dying, there simply weren't enough workers to maintain the economy. Now you might be thinking, okay, there was a lot of death. Why does that matter for society as a whole? Well, the answer is simple. Without workers, everything changed. The traditional feudal system was built on a hierarchy of lords, peasants, and serfs. But with so many peasants dead, the remaining ones became incredibly valuable. Suddenly, they could demand better wages, better working conditions, and more freedom than they had ever had before. And that's exactly what happened. Farmers and workers were in high demand, and their newfound leverage sparked the beginnings of the end for the rigid feudal system. It was a huge step towards social mobility and class change that was unheard of in medieval Europe. Before the plague, Europe's social structure was locked in place. If you were born a peasant, you stayed a peasant. Feudalism had dominated for centuries, and there didn't seem to be much hope for upward mobility. But when the Black Plague hit, it unleashed an economic revolution. With so many deaths, landowners were desperate for workers. Suddenly, peasants could negotiate their terms, and many of them fled their villages to work in cities where they could earn better pay. This shift gave rise to a more urbanized world, where common people started to gain more economic power and influence. In some cases, peasants even started buying their freedom, something that was practically unthinkable before. Over time, this erosion of the feudal system laid the groundwork for the rise of the middle class, the eventual decline of serfdom, and, believe it or not, even the dawn of the Renaissance. The plague didn't just kill people, it helped tear down an ancient system that had kept millions in bondage for centuries. With the new economic power came a more dangerous shift. People weren't just content with better pay and working conditions, they started demanding more control over their lives. The Black Plague gave them the courage to challenge the status quo, and revolts began to spread across Europe. One of the most famous revolts was the Peasants' Revolt in England in 1381. This was a direct result of the discontent that brewed after the plague. The survivors weren't willing to just return to the same old system of oppression. They wanted change. They wanted a voice. Though the revolt was ultimately crushed, it sent a powerful message. The power dynamics were shifting, and the lower classes were starting to demand a larger stake in society. While the revolts didn't immediately topple the social order, they were a crucial step in the long, slow march towards social equality. It showed that the world wasn't going to return to the way things were before the plague. But it wasn't just about money and power. The Black Plague also caused a massive crisis of faith. After seeing so many people die and so many innocent lives lost, people began to question the church. Why, they wondered, would God allow such devastation? The church had long been a pillar of stability in Europe, but the plague challenged its authority and influence in new ways. people began to search for new answers, and this opened the door for the rise of movements that eventually challenged the Catholic Church. The Protestant Reformation, led by figures like Martin Luther, would come a century later, but the seeds of religious discontent had already been planted during the plague. Some even turned to new religious movements and practices, hoping to make sense of the devastation. Others became disillusioned with the Church's inability to offer solace, which led to a breakdown in traditional religious structures and a shift towards secularism. The Black Plague didn't just kill millions. It set in motion a series of social changes that would forever alter the course of history. What do you think about the social changes brought on by the Black Plague? Do you believe that our current world is going through a similar transformation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, if you found this video interesting, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more deep dives into history's most fascinating events. Thanks for watching.